So I'm just telling you, it's not on the agenda, but we're going to do it. Unless three of you didn't want it. Awesome. All right. Ready, Colleen? Awesome. Ready, Keith? Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order a special city council meeting for Thursday, July 14th, 2022. Would everyone please stand and join for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Awesome. Roll call, Colleen? Here.
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 Councillor Giles.
Here. Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. Approval of the agenda is the next item.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moving to second, all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you, council. We have two public hearings this evening. Colleen, would you like to read what we need to read? Or Carrie?
Are we talking about reading the disclosures for the public hearing?
Yep.
We will do that after we go through this reimbursement district matter because
Okay, awesome.
The
We don't need to do anything for the reimbursement district.
doesn't require it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carrie. So, first item is Resolution 2022-053, establishing a Brookman Area Public Sanitary Sewer Reimbursement District and directing staff to enter into a reimbursement district agreement with the developer. Bob, Craig, good to see you.
Great. Good seeing you. Thank you for letting us come in on this particular special one, but timing was of the essence for it. If there's a way of getting this up on the screen. Yeah, I'm up and running. Yeah, I'm juiced up. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay.
Awesome.
Brookman Development LLC requests to establish a reimbursement district. Brookman LLC basically requested a reimbursement district in the Brookman area. The map before you shows basically, relatively, the area that we're talking about is within the Brookman Road, Sunset Boulevard, south of Sunset Boulevard, south of Cobble Court, Redfern Way, and in this general area right here. Brookman Development LLC submitted an application letter with attachments dated April 22nd, 2022, in which the establishment of a reimbursement district is being requested. This application will follow process requirements of the City of Sherwood Municipal Code, Section 13.24.010 through 13.24.150, with the final determination being made by the City Council with adoption of a resolution and recording of the resolution with Washington County Clerk, if applicable. Public Works Director's report has been created to fulfill Sherwood Municipal Code Section 13.30, and that should be in with the packet that you have, which gives a complete analysis of the thing. This presentation is basically excerpts out of that thing, the important parts. In specific, the Public Works Director's report must address the 7 following items per SMC Section 13.2030. The director will finance, whether the developer will finance or has financed some of all the cost of the public improvement, thereby making service available to property other than that owned by the developer. The boundary and size of the reimbursement district is agreed to. The actual or estimated cost of the public improvement serving the area of the proposed reimbursement district and the portion of the cost for which the developer should be reimbursed for each public improvement. A methodology for spreading the cost among the properties within the reimbursement district, and where appropriate, defining a unit for applying the reimbursement fee to property which may, with city approval, be partitioned, subdivided, altered, or modified at some future date. The city may use any methodology for apportioning cost on properties specifically benefited that is just and reasonable. The amount to be charged by the city for administration fee for the reimbursement agreement, the administration fee shall be fixed by the city council and will be included in the resolution approving and forming the reimbursement district. The administration fee may be a percentage of the total reimbursement fee expressed as an interest figure or a flat fee per unit to be deducted from the total reimbursement fee. Whether the public improvements will or have met city standards. Whether it is fair and in the public interest to create the reimbursement district. Now this is straight out of the code. So that's what we based. That's the director's report that's in your packet. Those requirements have to be met, all of them. And Craig had to sign off on it, as well as I did. His is more important. Just for your history and edification, history of the reimbursement districts in the city of Sherwood. The last reimbursement district formed by the city was an Area 59 reimbursement district, which covered the public infrastructure costs associated with the development of the Laurel Ridge Middle School and the Edie Ridge Elementary School. This reimbursement district was formed by City Council Resolution 2008-001 on March 14th, 2008. The Area 59 reimbursement district has worked as initiated with one change implemented by City Council. The reimbursement was extended by an additional 5 years by City Council Resolution 2014-073. This extension also limited the interest amount required to be paid for administration. The initial interest clause stated a 4% per year compounding rate, which taken to the end of the 10-year cycle amounted to over $140,000 of interest payments being owed. The clause was determined to be written incorrectly and eliminated from the reimbursement district extension resolution. The Middlebrook reimbursement district resolution language has corrected the clause to be a 4% simple interest rate on the initial reimbursement district value for a one-time fee of $20,000 to cover the administration expenses of the reimbursement district. So we've corrected that erroneous type of miscommunication. The construction cost of the Middlebrook Sanitary Sewer Trunk Line extension is broken into 3 parts. One up to 8-inch diameter is the responsibility of the developer, paid for by the developer. That is standard for the city. Anything that's 8-inch that is specific to providing service to his development, that's their problem to solve and pay for. Between 8 and 12-inch inclusive is the responsibility of the city and for which the amount of reimbursement district is being established. That is common for oversizing costs. That's when you'll hear that terminology used is an oversizing cost. And the city is usually on board for taking care of reimbursing, somehow getting that paid back to the developer for providing that additional capacity. Over 12-inch in size is the responsibility of Clean Water Service under its regional sanitary sewer trunk line program. Clean Water Services has already repaid the developer for the Clean Water Services share. So that is trunk lines 18-inch and up. We have an IGA with Clean Water Services that those are major facilities that are basically owned and operated by Clean Water Services. Therefore, they should be paid for out of their regional system, and that's where the funding came from that. So, what are we looking at? The public sanitary sewer trunk line that was constructed as part of the Middlebrook subdivision site development project is this red dashed line that you see here coming down and ending here. All the other yellow in the Middlebrook subdivision is their local service lines. It's public line, but it's 8-inch in diameter. The red line is an 18-inch sanitary sewer trunk line. The applicant had submitted a boundary, a reimbursement area boundary, and we reviewed that, and we said, okay, here's the boundary that they have presented across this area. So it's all of this, and it consisted of 5 different lots, sort of lots, because it's a portion of this lot. In reviewing that, the city has access through the land use process, planning process, to understand what development is doing and when they're doing it. So we have more information on what the future impacts may be and what subdivision development in that area was missed by their boundary and should be included in the district. Per the code, that's what we're supposed to do. So we came up with a separate boundary definition that included the Middlebrook, which is there, Riverside, Reserve at Cedar Creek Gardens, and this Brookman Place, and this potential development within the city limits, which is unnamed right now. Now, Middlebrook is developed and they're under construction for family residential. Riverside is under construction. Reserve at Cedar Creek is under construction. Cedar Creek Gardens got approved or is being approved. And we know that the boundary for the Cedar Creek Gardens wasn't quite established with the southern portion being accessed. However, we have, with the subdivision development, they had extended a service line, an 8-inch line, to provide service to the development area in here. So we adjusted the boundary to include the area of that subdivision, but reduced it to tax lots, which I'll show you, that it eliminated this area from actually being incorporated into tax lot count, because that section, that little arm up there, is going to a different section of the sanitary line and not part of the reimbursement district. They're not getting serviced by it.
And Bob, that'd be the same case with the rest of the corner that's not in your proposed boundary?
It is not in the proposed boundary because it will be taking service off a different section. They'll have to extend a trunk line separate from this particular one. This particular trunk line is part of the Brookman area extension, which takes and provides service to the Sherwood High School area, Sherwood West. So it's an extension that we're working with Clean Water Services on. So it's a much bigger project than just this little segment right here. Now this, you can see how many lots have been assigned to each of these things. Brookman had 145, Riverside had 28, Reserve had 58. Those are known quantities. Cedar Creek Gardens basically had 42, and there's like 3 lots up here, so we had a reduction of those lots in the calculations. But the only ones with Brookman Place subdivision, they came in and they said, what could we do? And they gave us a sort of a layout which was doable, and so we know how many lots they can do. So the only part that is left out as far as having a calculation based on experience of what is developable in the area, I came up with 34 lots with 70% of the area being that area being developable, with 30% being taken up by open space, roadway, right-of-way, stuff like that, and the rest being divided out by a 5,000 square foot lot. So you can see here's our number of lots and the calculations on how we came up with the number of lots and everything like that. There's basically, again, only 2 lots in there where it was an estimate, but I guarantee it's probably going to be really close to that, just on the amount of development area that would normally go with a subdivision based on right-of-way dedication and open space requirements. Reimbursement districts based on construction cost, up to an 8-inch, again, paid by developer, 8 to 12 diameter cost recovery by the reimbursement district, and then 12 to 18 by Clean Water Services. The reimbursement district construction cost that was provided by the applicant showed a construction cost for a 12-inch line to be $511,868. Contractor construction costs less sanitary SDC creditable amount for the oversizing from 8 to 12 was a $10,000 credit, which they received. So they're asking for a reimbursement district to cover their construction cost for somebody else that's going to be tapping into it for that 8-inch line. Because the other person, the adjacent property developers, didn't have to pay for that extension. So they're trying to recover the cost of that extension through the 8-inch line. And that's for $500,000 and change. When we looked at the proportionate share of everything, and we said, okay, what is it that we're looking at? What did the applicant give us, and versus as methodology, and what is most reasonable for the city to use and manage? The applicant gave us a methodology. It was kind of convoluted and difficult to work with. We came up with something that is much more knowable to us, which was, we know how many lots these people are bringing in. It's a subdivision. Most of these we already have approved. They're under construction. So we said, let's go with the lot count. And from there, you get a per lot cost. And then you apply that to the subdivision, and that's their reimbursement requirement for their lot in total, or for their subdivision in total. Staff has reviewed the proposed allocation methodology and finds the methodology does not assign costs and adjust in a reasonable manner based on the known and projected use of the system by the properties within the district. It appears the applicant's methodology undersizes its own usage and thus share of the cost of the system. Footage length is appropriate and typical unit of allocation for street construction costs, but not appropriate for sanitary sewer system, where the benefit of a property derives is not connected to its frontage. In addition, justification for 30-70% split in valuations was not presented. So they had if you look in the report, they had a 30-70% split between frontage and the lot area, and we're going, well, how'd you come up with that? What is the justification? Doesn't make any sense to us. Again, staff is recommending the cost allocation method based on the total number of lots in each development within the district, which will or are expected to take service from the sanitary trunk line. The total reimbursement cost was divided by the total number of actual or expected lots within the district to arrive at a per unit cost of $15.85 and 33. This is multiplied by the number of actual or expected lots on each current parcel to arrive at a per parcel cost, which is a subdivision, the lot cost, overall. Next steps. It's July 14th. Public hearing is the first presentation of the reimbursement district request by applicant through city staff. We received one email in response to the public notice of the public hearing, questions how Brookman area sanitary sewer SDCs impact the calculations for the reimbursement district. Staff has concluded the SDC methodology for Brookman area does not reflect current project intent and is severely undervalued. SDC methodology for the area will need to be reevaluated, and as will the sanitary sewer master plan. Staff's opinion is that the reimbursement valuation is not impacted to any significant degree. And that is something that goes into that is the fact that the master plan called out a 10-inch line, and it called out a 5,500-foot length of a 10-inch line. And what we're looking at is significantly more than that, number one, for the Brookman area. Number two is the cost valuation in the master plan was $1.8 million for that 10-inch line installation. And right now, this line is probably what they're asking for in reimbursement costs is for 4 inches of oversizing cost at $500,000. The valuation of the per lineal foot cost for that SDC is minuscule. So a change in the values of, how much credit should we give them for the SDC to take away from this reimbursement value is really sort of, it doesn't balance out. So we need to just say, the recommendations that we just say, it does balance out and we're okay with that. If no public comments have been presented during the hearing and all city council members are present, city council may choose to conduct a second reading if unanimous decision of the city council. Building department has currently issued final approvals for 10 home lots, which makes those home lots available for sale. Timing is critical since lots may be sold in the interim between the first and second reading if the second reading is set to the next available city council general session. If any lots are sold, then the owner information on the current lots will need to be updated and a new public hearing notice must be formed with current owners listed or removed, because once they've gotten and sold their lots and got
So Bob, the limitation on the first and second, or the purpose of a second reading typic by charter is ordinances, not resolutions. So,
I am not, I'd have to go.
Yeah.
You have to talk to the city council or, legal counsel on that. But what I was told was, I could do it, the resolution, we could do that
today,
if everybody was present and there was a unanimous, because it's an emergency situation. But I
so
still.
Carrie,
have
if you
to
just
do
pull
notice.
up the city charter online, or Kim's looking at you. No. If it's a resolution, you just have to have a quorum, then a majority of quorum.
I don't see anything in that second reading on resolutions, but I'll let Carrie.
So we'll get to it, but let you.
I will look, but my understanding was there was a discussion with Alan Rappelier earlier today, and the consensus was that it was 6 days, that the second reading couldn't happen today, even though.
That is not the question.
Second reading is applicable for resolution.
Ordinances. I put $5 on that.
It would make my life a lot easier if you could, please.
So while we're chewing on this, we'll get that answer today. In the next 5 or 45 minutes.
If it does need, if you can't get the second reading in today,
So there's I don't believe a second reading is required. I believe you can act today. If we determine a second reading is required, then we cannot act today. Because, right.
okay.
So we'll get that answered.
you guys
You
leave
focus
that.
on the fence of your presentation. That's why I just wanted to interrupt to get what's happening now happening.
But don't rely on me for legal stuff, please.
Okay, I thought what was.
Well, that's basically the end of the technical session relative to what we're recommending as far as the design report, the director's report, which Craig has signed off on. What we're recommending is different than what was submitted as far as methodology. The methodology that we're recommending has the benefit of being, in our perspective, easier to manage, easier to assign, calls it out a little bit easier, and overall works into our system of building permits very easily, because we can do it per unit, per this, that, and the other thing. We've already got most of that already done, and we'd like to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, whenever you can, try to kiss it. Yeah, go ahead. Questions of staff?
Oh, I was going to say, so in an effort to keep it simple, And I just have barely got my hands around the STC process, so I'm just trying to, I'm going to explain it back to you, and maybe for some of the people that are online. So we're saying that there's a developer who is spending is getting us a bigger pipe than was originally planned for that area. They're spending $500,000 to do it. They would like this reimbursement area set up so that they can recoup some of those costs from other lots that are paying in.
That will benefit.
Or that will benefit from this line. But they will pay in addition to the other SDCs that are on that lot size. They'll pay that additional amount.
They'll still be paying SDCs for that.
Right, but so they're going to pay for, because obviously the SDCs cover other things besides this sewer pipe, right? They cover the roads and the,
So
yeah, it's all the other stuff.
there's individual SDCs for different things.
Okay.
So there is a sewer SDC, and in this case, a developer is building the pipe that they need for their project, and they're oversizing it for the region.
For the benefit of.
And it's also being oversized as a requirement from, by Clean Water Services in the city. But that 4 inches from between an 8-inch pipe and a 12-inch pipe is
Yeah,
being covered shared by everybody that benefits in that area.
and they'll pay additionally the existing SDC.
None of the
sewer lines.
SDCs go away, so everyone still
Okay,
pays SDCs.
so this is, okay, that was the key I was trying to figure out, was
Because if
that dollar amount that we saw that each of them, that adds to the cost of the development and the house.
We actually gave them credit for off-site installation of sanitary. So for their 8-inch line that was off-site, they got SDC credit for that. So that's already been dealt with. The reimbursement district is strictly for the oversizing cost. And that's a rational and reasonable expectation to recover those costs.
yeah,
Yeah, 100%. It seemed like there was, it was more complicated, and so I was just trying to make sure that it was as simple as.
There's a lot of complication when you start throwing SDCs into it, because
Yeah.
SDCs are based on capital improvement
Right.
projects that are established in the master plan. The master plan for the sanitary system doesn't match what we're planning now. It's way smaller, and the valuation of the construction cost of that, we now know, is way undervalued. So when you look at the SDC value for that, that's been generated from that and is specific to that area, it's incredibly low. And that means that we're not recovering
But
what
you
it
said that-
should be for the extension, and that means when we do a master plan update, and that's a recommendation for the future, is to do a master plan sanitary sewer update as soon as possible, and do a rate methodology update with better numbers for construction costs, so that the individual SDC rate for that area will actually cover recover the costs of
Right.
that sanitary.
Right, so I'm a little bit confused, because I thought he said that it was 1.8 million was what they originally thought it would be to put that line in.
That was in the master plan.
Right, but you're saying that's too low, and this is telling me that somebody's putting in a pipe that's bigger for 500,000, so I'm.
Upsizing.
It's upsizing.
Just the upsize part,
it's
okay,
an
all right, okay, that's just the incremental.
it's
Okay.
just for that extra, so it's
Okay.
for the cost of the pipe from a 8-inch to a 12-inch, so it's a much more expensive.
Okay,
If you
perfect.
think about it,
That was
Clean
what was
Water
unclear.
Services picked up the cost from the 12 to the 18, which is a 6-inch increase.
Okay.
At quite a bit of money.
That was the piece I was missing, is it
Yeah.
seemed like it was plenty of money for that. I was not aware that it was the whole pipe.
It does get quite convoluted when you start dealing with these things, yeah.
Yep, awesome, thanks, Bob. So I'm just going to let it, if anybody is here that wants to give testimony on the proposed resolution. Neil Shannon? Please hit the button so it's green. Perfect, welcome, Neil.
I've had some practice. Good evening. My name is Neil Shannon, and I reside at 23997 Southwest Redfern Drive in Sherwood. I appear this evening to oppose Resolution 2022-053. I understand that a PID can have appropriate uses. A good example is the soon-to-end Area 59 PID that spread the costs of water, storm, and sewer improvements to an area that included large public infrastructure for a new school. This proposal has few similarities to the PID approved 14 years ago, as there is no public facilities, only private residences under construction. During my review, I found an interesting paper by John Whitesell prepared for the Stephen F. Austin University. I provided Sylvia a link to that paper. I hope that you've had an opportunity to review. While generally positive on the use of PIDs, the paper notes that PIDs are certainly a beneficial mechanism to fund projects that are otherwise not feasible due to constraints on city budgets. He goes on to warn that local elected officials will want PIDs monitored and only used in proper circumstances. I could better understand the use of a PID if growth is being hampered by environmental conditions requiring remediation, or if there were challenges to developments due to geographical limitations. None of those conditions apply to the Brookman Road area, demonstrated by the fact that the subdivision has already been approved and construction is proceeding at a rapid pace. I am concerned that there is very little benefit to the city of Sherwood with this PID, but significant financial benefits to the developers of the Brookman properties. In effect, the developers are mortgaging the cost of infrastructure by having future owners of properties pay mortgage, pocketing the proceeds and heading out of town. As noted in a paper, situations can arise when home buyers are unaware of the PID and the increased taxes through the assessments. This could make the new homeowner struggle financially. PIDs could cause homes to become harder to sell and possibly creating a negative outcome for someone forced to sell. In a second link that I provided Sylvia, the article Lander Council Questions Public Improvement Districts noted that the cost to future homeowners. A homeowner and realtor noted that PIDs were originally created to help spur development in areas that developers were not interested in, which he supports. He did go on to note that now they're being used by developers and cities as simply a way not to pay for development costs for new subdivisions and then burden the homeowners with development costs. Lender City Council member Shannon Shepard, who is also a realtor, said PIDs were pitched to the council as a way to make housing more affordable. She went on to say, I know a lot of developers are saying it's difficult to get financing for these big projects, so it's a funding mechanism, she said. But I'm not really okay with that if in the end result is that the consumer gets a bad deal. Shepard indicated that she would not approve another PID if it came before the Lender City Council in the future. This proposal for Sherwood PID is a lose-lose situation for the city. Future citizens of Sherwood lose by becoming indebted to the added costs foisted on them by the developer, and the city of Sherwood loses reputation by becoming the cruel sheriff of Nottingham collecting the tax burden.
Thanks, Neil. So just to be clear, Mr. Neil's testimony is mistaken. This is not a public improvement district in which taxes are going to be levied on the future landowners. It will be expenses paid on new lots as part of construction. So, right?
Correct. I would also.
And I've got one more public testimony after you just.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted me to respond to one item.
Go ahead.
Is that the reason that the oversizing is because we want to serve the high school. I mean, the high school is the primary driver for the extension of this line and the size of this line. We've got an IGA with the high school to provide for this line in a certain time frame.
Right.
So we're sort of locked into providing this system
Yep.
in a highly pressurized system, in a highly pressurized state, because the high school is currently on system with temporary sanitary pumping systems on the site, which are maintenance drivers for them.
Yep.
So that's the other aspect of this that isn't included with this, but it is a justification for acceptance of the off-site oversizing costs as a justifiable cause.
And Joe, if you want to come up, Joe, press the button on the thing and make sure it's green, and welcome.
Ready?
Yeah.
My name is Joe Sheevy. I represent the applicant. Address is 1300 Esther Street, Vancouver, Washington. I'm with the Holt Homes company that did paid and had the sewer line that we're talking about installed. And first of all, to address one issue here, nobody's taxes is going up. It's only if they connect to this sewer line will they be charged. And so it's new houses basically that will be charged for this per lot cost. Second thing is that, or the last thing I want to say is that if you're going to create the KISS system, a lot of jurisdictions charge the fee to the various parcel that are being addressed in the application and the staff report at final plat before they can get final plat recorded, instead of at individual home takedowns. And so that way the developer that's developing these phases, and by the way, of the 500,000, 45% or 46% of it Holt is paying for already. It's just the remaining of that portion that we're asking for reimbursement for. So we're paying our fair share of this oversizing as well. But of course we've already paid our share because we installed it and we're not getting reimbursed for it. So what I recommend is that, making it easy, is just charge it when they record their plat. Before they can record the plat, they pay these fees, and then the city doesn't have to do it on a house-by-house basis. Any questions?
No. Thank you. Anyone else want to give public testimony that hasn't already? Yeah, please come forward. Please just state your name and address in the record.
Max Bonder, David Weekly Homes, 11301 Northeast 163, Vancouver, Washington. I'm from the Reserve at Cedar Creek subdivision, right next door to Holt. I'm on the land development manager there. And so I just wanted to support Joe. I know he's trying to get these reimbursements back. I know how difficult it is. And I just say, even as a developer, we're happy to support Joe in getting these things reimbursed, whichever makes it easier. I know the carry costs when the developer takes out the loans, it has to pay interest on that loan. I think it's, I don't know, Joe, what it is now, 9% interest per month, that the money that you spent. So getting that money back reimbursed is very difficult. So, and once again, I think for any public personnel here, it's developers sort of reimbursing another developer. So I would just say, we support this notion. We reviewed the numbers. Everything seems reasonable. So we look forward to just proceeding. And I know Joe wants his money, I think, during the plat recording. I think that's also reasonable to try to alleviate that interest carry cost that they're incurring. I know our plat is getting ready to record soon. So I think overall, I just wanted to voice our, as a developer, support for getting this reimbursement district set up. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else like to give testimony? We'll close the public hearing on this resolution. Yep, ask more questions of staff. And Carrie, did you find an answer?
I did.
What's the answer to the question?
Answer to the question is that you can take action tonight through administrative determination as long as the city recorder takes a roll call vote.
Very good. Thanks, Carrie. Questions of staff from council?
Yes, so I had a question. So the developer that's requesting this reimbursement district, did we require them to do the upsizing, the city
Oh, yeah.
clean water services?
Yeah.
It was required, so they had to do that and pay for it out of their own pocket. And then their upsizing is benefiting all those other properties at some point because they will connect in. Am I understanding that right?
The properties that are adjacent to it could fit into an 8-inch. The area is not that large, the number of properties, houses that would basically drain into that system could utilize an 8-inch line. But because we're adding the high school and extensive areas outside of that zone, the upsizing is for future development of a larger area and the high school addition.
So they're paying their portion, so to speak, of the upsizing as well.
They're paying their portion of the upsizing
Yeah.
cost, yes.
So if we were to deny this, then the current developer is on the, they're responsible for all the costs.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah. Right, okay. That's fine.
So I have a question. So there was a comment about including it when the plat is recorded, the cost. Is there, if I'm going to be a devil's advocate, what's the negative of that? It seems like it might make it harder for, they've got to come up with the chunk of change versus a little each time, but I assume if you're putting in, 50 houses, you can get a chunk of change, but.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of timing and how staff manages to control all of that. It's just like having this reimbursement district. Would have been nice to have had this up front.
Right, but.
Had that established. Now I'm sort of locked into their plat's already recorded. To be honest, what do I do with that now? The reimbursement district methodology, I would have to split it back up to pre-plat, post.
So the question is, if it's going to cause us more work and delay this, even though it's maybe a pain to do it on the individual lots, it may not be worth it. But if it's not going to be much more work and it's going to be less work overhead for the city to just collect the chunk when it's, I'm not a builder, so I'm trying to understand what's the negative of.
So what Bob is saying, that you can't do it by recording of the plat because some of the projects, the plats are recorded and the others are not. So it's
So we
best to
can't-
do it. It's
okay.
really the best, to kiss it, you need to do it by lot.
But the one that's already recorded
wait.
is the people
Yeah,
who already paid
the
the
one
money.
that's-
Methodology, the city can establish whatever methodology we want to use. And the easy way for me to say, okay, how does this methodology get applied that is uniform?
Right,
But the methodology wouldn't change. Like it would just be you'd get all the lots at once at recording instead of as each individual lot gets sold
And the only ones that have already been recorded
are the ones that are
paid.
being reimbursed. So I don't see why we couldn't make this change.
Methodology, and we could go through.
Can't adopt it today.
But then it creates more of a problem with timing and stuff like that, because as lots are sold, I have to take those lots that are in that reimbursement district out of the remaining lots.
But wouldn't that be simpler to do all the lots at once when the plat is recorded versus lot by lot by lot by lot?
But we would not be passing this resolution for probably a month. Or
So how
more.
about this? Could we add some language to this that says that you'll do it lot by lot unless?
I'm not voting to modify this resolution personally.
Okay, I was going to say unless the developer wants to give you the whole check at the front. I mean, okay, all right. I'm not for delaying it or making it. I'm trying to encourage people who are trying to do business in our city to not make it be a pain. So if they're saying there's an easier way, but we're saying that it's going to be more painful because of some other reasons, and that's fine. I
think trying to maintain the bookkeeping on this, because it would run through engineering and the building department.
Okay.
And being on a lot by lot basis, I could tie it into building permits.
Okay.
At this point. A lot easier. If I did it by platting, then it would be falling on engineering department to control everything, and then to make sure that each as the things get platted, what's going on. If they haven't sold a lot, doesn't change anything. There's a lot of internal workings that I'm not really a part of normally, and
That's
the
fine.
connectivity between how building department gets their fees in and assigns SDCs and stuff like that. I just try and come up with what's the
Okay. That's fine. I would, if I would guess that top priority is getting reimbursed. Second priority would be getting it done in the way that they think is easier for developers to do, right? So if we just said,
have language in the reimbursement district resolution where they get the interest on the unpaid portion.
right, but so let's
So
just,
that their costs over time do get
okay,
covered to them.
that's great, okay.
Other questions of staff? Sean, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do actually, just one. So actions that we're taking tonight, I want to make sure I understand this. Are they just specific to this Brookman development? Are they going to have any down the road impacts to any other development in the city? Are we putting any future development in
The
a different
areas
position?
that I've designated within the boundary of the Brookman area are the only ones that would be impacted. And the only future ones are the two lots that are right next to the Middlebrook subdivision, which would gain access to sewer services through Middlebrook, which would be justifiable. So they're included. So everything else is, throughout the city, no impact.
Okay, so the scope of this that we're talking about tonight is strictly going to be Brookman subdivision. It won't, we're not creating some kind of other law that's going to.
Brookman area.
It's the Brookman area, yeah.
And I assume the high school has already paid for their 10-inch or 12-inch line or whatever?
They've
They
paid up.
paid for their proportionate share cost by installing sewer line up Elwert and Kruger.
Perfect.
Plus the temporary operations of the pump.
Plus the temporary, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So there is a public, in addition to the private benefit that those homeowners are going to get, part of it is just completing our agreement with the high school that we're going to get them what they're paid for, essentially. Okay.
Well said. More questions of staff? Discussion by council? So we heard from legal counsel that if city council would like to consider passing this resolution today, we can. It would be a roll call vote if there was a motion and a second. Per comments from staff earlier, it sounds like they would very much like us to do that if we can. So is there a discussion or a motion by council?
I will make a motion to approve, I was trying to find my agenda, to approve Resolution 2022-053, establishing the Brookman Area Public Sanitary Sewer Reimbursement District and directing staff to enter into a reimbursement district agreement with the developer, Brookman Development LLC.
Second.
Moved in second. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Colleen, would you do a roll call? Aye.
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 Garland? John?
Oh, okay, I can't hear Colleen, so
Aye. Okay, great. So it was unanimous. Thank you, council. Thank you, Bob. Thanks, Craig. Thank you, Carrie and Colleen. And Carrie, would you like to read what we need to read for item B of public hearings?
Absolutely. So, with your indulgence, I will open the public hearing for appeal hearing LU 2021-009 MM Cedar Creek Plaza multifamily. Tonight, the City Council will hold a public hearing on a land use appeal from the Planning Commission. The City Council's role is to review the record of the proceeding before the Planning Commission, the appeal documents and conduct a public hearing considering solely the evidence already in the record. In making this decision, this council must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. A staff report has been prepared for this appeal and has been made available to the public 7 days before today. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to this appeal. Staff has analyzed the appeal issue relying on the reasoning set forth in the Planning Commission's decision. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the council will follow is set out in state law and the Sherwood Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps we will follow tonight will be, staff will present the staff report for 15 minutes, questions, if any, by the hearing body for staff. Next, we will then open the hearing for additional testimony, and the time will be limited as follows. First, we will hear from the applicant, who is also the appellant, 30 minutes to be split between the presentation and rebuttal. Next, we will hear from persons who testified during the proceeding before the Planning Commission, 4 minutes each. Third, we will have rebuttal from the applicant for the remainder of the 30 minutes. Then we will have final comments by staff for 15 minutes, questions of staff, if any, and then deliberation by City Council. As noted, the council's review of this matter is limited, one, only to those individuals who participated orally or in writing before the Planning Commission, and two, the only evidence the council may consider is that presented by the Planning Commission. No new evidence is allowed. Anyone wishing to speak in this appeal should either have emailed the city in advance of this hearing or have filled out a blue, I don't know if they're blue, speaker request paper located at the back of the room and turned it into staff. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and address. Testimony should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria, again, limited to the issues raised in the notice of appeal. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the appeal under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open so long as it does not contain any new evidence. Any written materials received by city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the record. If the council makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised before the Planning Commission. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that allowing the city and all parties to respond to the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Members of the City Council reviewing this matter are to be unbiased. So I'm going to ask a series of questions and then I will allow you all to respond appropriately. The questions are, do any of the councilors believe they are biased or have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the property or proposal in question? Have any councilors discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as a visit to the site in question? Again, this review is limited to the record, so any facts resulting from an independent site visit or evaluation of any other facts may not be considered as part of this appeal. So my question for you all are, can you be unbiased, which means can you apply the record that was prepared before the Planning Commission against the applicable approval criteria? Do you have any conflict of interest? In other words, do you have any financial interest in the outcome? And 3, any ex parte contacts, meaning communications outside the hearing.
Great, so I'll start. So I can be unbiased. I have driven by the site, but I haven't even paused to really look at it, go to the restaurants over there. And ex parte contact, the extent is someone, when the application originally came up, emailed, and I said, you know, go to the Planning Commission meetings if you want to weigh in, contact staff if you have questions. And that was the extent of the engagement that I had. And I think that answered all of it, right? I have no personal conflict of interest or da-da-da, so,
Thank you, Mayor Mayes.
yeah. Next?
I'll go next. I can be unbiased. I visited that site many, many times because of all the local restaurants and businesses over there. Never really paid attention. In fact, I had to go think to myself, is there a site over there that you just drive in, right? And then I think I might have got the same email as the mayor did on that, but I didn't respond. I don't believe so.
Thank you.
I can be unbiased. I have no conflict of interest. I have not been on the actual lot that's proposed to be developed. I've been in all the adjacent lots many, many times. I've had no ex parte contact. I was the council liaison to the planning commission, I believe, for the first of the public hearings on this matter, but I was no longer a liaison through the end of the hearing and when it was voted on. So, yeah, no conflict.
Yeah, I certainly I have talked with staff, city manager, and prior city manager on at least one occasion each, in general about it.
And I can be unbiased on this. I do not have any conflict of interest. I also, I was on the planning commission when the initial evidence was heard, but it was continued a number of times. And then I was a city council liaison during the voting, but I did not participate in any of the deliberation or the voting at all. In fact, I didn't talk at all. So, I plan on participating tonight.
Thank you.
And Sean?
Yeah, I have no conflict of interest, no financial interest. I am familiar with the location, just vaguely. I have no other inside information on anything there, and I do believe I can be unbiased. So I have no reason to step aside.
Awesome. Thanks.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Does anyone in attendance tonight wish to question any of the commissioners about these disclosures? Counselors with respect to these disclosures? Wrong city, sorry. Seeing none, with your indulgence, we will now commence with the staff report.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, Mayor May, City Council. Good to be back with you in person. It's been a 2-year hiatus, so
Wow.
good to see all of you in person and be back here presenting in person. Eric Rutledge, Associate Planner with the City of Sherwood, and Carrie doesn't need an introduction, I don't think, but she's our contract legal counsel and assisted on this appeal staff report and has been great with the busy time we've had with land use. So I just want to recognize Carrie to my right. So I'll be giving the staff presentation for LU 2021-009. This is a land use appeal hearing for Cedar Creek Plaza multifamily. So I'm going to talk about, just really briefly go over the site and the application history, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carrie, who's going to talk about the zoning, the Planning Commission decision, and then the issues that were raised on the appeal. So the...
Eric, if you want to change the view on your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're not...
Sean, but people want to see more of the presentation.
Yeah, is it me or is it IT that needs to do that?
Might be IT.
There we go. Thank you for letting us know. All right.
Yeah, we're there. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Perfect.
Appeal summary, the applicant of the application is Deacon Development. The appellant is the same, Deacon Development. The proposal is for a 67-unit apartment building and associated site improvements. Zoning on the site is retail commercial, and for the procedures, this is a site plan major modification, which is a type 4 land use action, and we always include a link to the application materials down here at the bottom. We have received actually 3 additional new pieces of testimony. This one only shows 2. We got the last one in just a few hours ago. So all of this testimony is in front of you as a printed packet, so you should have the packet. It starts with Exhibit A and goes through Exhibit C is what I would add to this slide. Exhibit C was from David Peterson, but that is included in the printed packet for you. There also should be one packet in the back here for any members of the public. So this was received, all of this testimony was received after the release of the staff report. So that's why it was forwarded to you and printed for you. All right, getting into sort of the details of the site and the land use history. So it sounds like all of you have been to the site, but this is the Cedar Creek Plaza Commercial Center. The site plan, original site plan for this was approved in 2017. Providence has been here on the corner for some time, but really the major portion of the site was developed through the 2017 site plan approval and conditional use permit. So that included the Ackerley. It included these 6 retail pads here at the south and at the south end of the site, and it included a redevelopment of the Providence parking lot. The building here didn't change. It did not include any land use approval or use for what is now identified as Lot 2, this lot here in orange that was left vacant as part of the site plan approval. After the site plan approval, also in 2017, the owner of this tract here did a subdivision to create the 7 lots that you see here. And I think it's worth noting, as part of the original site plan approval, there was 3 different owners that were involved in that. Providence here on the corner, the Ackerley, which was done by Reimbursement Development, and then Deacon owned, this was one single parcel when the site plan was approved. So one large parcel here, and then the Deacon, the owner and the applicant, subdivided this after the site plan approval to create the 7 lots that you're seeing here. After the subdivision was approved, the applicant sold 5 of the 4 of the 7 lots, so the ones that are not shown in color here, those were all sold. When the applicant applied for the development, they owned Lot 2, Lot 3, and Lot 7. After they applied for the development, they sold Lot 3 to a new owner. And so that kind of brings us to today, where in May 2021, the applicant applied for a major modification to develop an 84-unit apartment building on Lot 2. So again, at that time when they submitted, they own Lot 2, own Lot 3, and Lot 7. The existing conditions at that time when they submitted was that Lot 2 was vacant as a pad here in the back. Lot 3 was developed with a commercial building and parking, and Lot 7 was also developed with a commercial building and parking. After the sale of the property and through the land use process, and an important point of, just going back slightly, important point of getting to the 84 units, the applicant was relying on the lot area from lots 2, lots 3, and lot 7 to get to the 84 units on lot 2. The applicant, after they applied for the development, then sold lot 3 to a new owner. That owner then came forward as part of the land use process and objected to their lot being included as part of the application in the lot area from their lot, or the residential entitlements being applied to lot 2. As a result of that, the applicant revised their application. They removed lot 3 from the application proposal and reduced the unit count from 84 units to 67 units, only relying on lots 2 and lots 7 to get to the 67 units. And that's what Planning Commission made the decision off of, was the revised proposal for 67 units using lots 2 and lots 7. So that's what the Planning Commission decision was based off of. And I believe that includes that slide. One more just note on the existing conditions, just to orient you to the site. Bound by Edie Road and Highway 99. Surrounding land uses mostly commercial in all directions, with the exception of this high-density townhome development to the east here. That's the land use history and the existing conditions. And here's the sort of zoomed in to just lot 2, this vacant pad that I don't think anyone really notices when they go there. I do, as I've been processing this. But this is the existing Planet Fitness that's there, if that's the right gym name. Planet Fitness is here. The mud bay would be to the south here, so this is just a zoom in of lot 2 where the actual development would occur. Building pad is shown in yellow. It'd be a 3-story building. open space and landscaping shown in green, and then parking shown in gray. So decent setback to the rear property line in these townhomes here, and then a reduced setback to the interior lots here of the commercial subdivision. And here's the proposed building design. This is the front elevation. This would face sort of the inside of the commercial center towards the mud bay. 3 stories, total height of about 35 feet. This is the rear of the building. This would face the townhomes to the rear of the site. And that's the building exterior. And now I'll turn it over to Carrie to talk about zoning.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm going to set the stage here and talk a little bit about how we get to the appeal issues that were raised. The zoning is retail commercial and surrounded by commercial zoning to the north, east, and south. The site abuts high-density residential zone to the west, which has been developed with townhomes. So it's the and when you have retail commerciall and you have multifamily housing proposed, the chart in the table of uses in 1622-020 says that multifamily housing subject to the dimensional requirements of the high-density residential zone in 1612-030. So it is that cross-reference to the high-density residential zone dimensional standards that is the subject of this. So moving forward, then the threshold question is we've got to review this subject to the dimensional requirements that I just read. And so this is an excerpt. What follows below is an excerpt of the code 1612-030, and it is this table that follows C here, the first 2 lines, minimum lot area, multifamily, the first 2 units must be located on 8,000 square feet, and then each additional unit after the first 2 requires 1,500 square feet. So that was the lot area that is an issue in this case.
Yeah. I remember the conversation when we adopted that code.
Well, then I won't belabor the point.
Well, not all of us remember it.
No, I'm great. I'm the only one.
So this slide, I think, gives you a good example of how this works. So using the original proposal of 84 units, they needed 8,000 square feet for the first 2 units, 1,500 square feet for each unit thereafter. They needed 131 square feet for 84 units. So the applicant proposed to use the lot area from lot 2, lot 3, and lot 7 to reach 145,490 square feet. So as Eric explained, during the first hearing, the owner of lot 3 objected to using their lot area. And so the applicant revised their proposal in March of 2022 to propose 67 units, which requires 105,500 square feet. And they got that square footage from lot 2 and lot 7. So that resulted in 105,851 square feet, and that's how they satisfied that lot area standard. And in the revised application from March 2022, the applicant maintained that, quote, each of the applicable development standards addressed below are satisfied to at least the minimum stipulated requirements. So the assumption was up until March of 2022 that the lot area calculations applied, right? They had to be satisfied for the Planning Commission to approve this application. So at the Planning Commission, a number of planning commissioners raised concerns about this question of use of borrowing lot area from another lot. And so that concern was raised, and the applicant responded by arguing that the definition of lot, which is similar to what they're arguing now, is that the definition of lot in the code includes complete lots of record. It says a single lot of record or a combination of complete lots of record qualify as a lot. And that allowed them to borrow lot area from another lot. And so that was the argument presented before the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission determined that, whoops, no, it's okay. The Planning Commission determined that the lot area standards are dimensional requirements applicable to multifamily housing within the retail commercial zone. So what the issue is, if you look at the list of uses, multifamily uses, it talks about the dimensional requirements. And then you go to the table at subsection C of the high density zone, and you will see the table says development standards. It doesn't say dimensional requirements. And so the question the Planning Commission had to answer first was whether lot area is a dimensional requirement. And what the Planning Commission said was that it was because, first of all, determining lot area requires inquiry into dimension, right? You have to know what the lot width and the lot depth are in order to know what the lot area is. And all of the dimensional requirements in the table are directed to a lot. They're directed to a singular lot, right? If you could borrow area from a non-contiguous lot, you would have to do that same borrowing in order to calculate the lot width and the lot depth and the lot setback. And that would be impossible if you have non-contiguous lots. So that was part of the Planning Commission's finding. The Planning Commission also pointed out that there is a definition of the term lot area in the code. And that definition is a measurement of total horizontal area within the lines of a lot. And that's the way the Planning Commission thought about this is you've got to be able to draw a line around the outside. If you have to lift up your pencil, it's not horizontal anymore, right? You've got to move to a different outside series of lot lines. So the idea of lot area is the outside boundaries of either one lot or two lots if they're adjacent, and we sometimes call those a parcel. And a parcel has contiguity between the lots. And so that was how the Planning Commission determined that there must be, they have to touch, the lots have to touch in order to qualify for shared lot area. The other thing Planning Commission pointed out was that Lot 7 has been developed. So that lot area isn't available for borrowing anyway because it's already been put to another use. So that was the Planning Commission's evaluation of the issue, and the Planning Commission's decision is now before you on appeal. And we have received a petition for review, and we have also received some written testimony from the applicant, and I want to sort of share that with you a little bit, assuming that they will also do the same. The first issue that the appellant raises is that the dimensional requirements are not the same as the development standards. And they argue that because in describing the table in subsection B of 1612.030, there is a reference to Except as modified under 1668 and wetlands and natural areas or townhomes, or as otherwise provided, required minimum lot areas, dimensions, and setbacks shall be provided in the following table. And the appellant's position is that that reference makes clear that lot area is not a dimension. And they believe that there is ambiguity in the question about whether or not lot area is a dimensional requirement. And I'm assuming you all know about clear and objective standards. There's a state law that says that when cities are reviewing applications for housing, they are constrained to consider only clear and objective standards. And the argument that the applicant is making, or appellant is making, is that determining whether or not lot area is a dimensional standard is not clear and objective. And so I think that the Planning Commission's response to this would be that determining whether or not lot includes enough square footage to support a number of units is not a subjective determination. The actual calculation itself is not subjective, right? We went through it. You know, you never ask a lawyer to do math, but I did math and nobody called me out on it, so it must have been okay. The other thing that I want to point out is oftentimes when we're determining about whether or not something is clear and objective, we look, or what something means, we look to the context, right? We don't just look at things in isolation, we look to the context. And if we look at subsection A of 1612.030, it says, no lot area or other site dimension shall be reduced below the minimum required by code. This suggests that lot area is a site dimension. And all appear to agree that lot depth and width are dimensional requirements, and I think this begs the question, if those are dimensional requirements, how is lot area not a dimensional requirement? So the second appeal issue is, all right, so the second appeal issue is this question of definition of lot and whether or not a lot includes more than one lot that is not contiguous. And the appellant's argument is that lot includes complete lots of record, and since the words lot area is included in the term lot, the area must also include the outside dimensions of multiple lots. Again, the argument is that this isn't clear and objective. I just explained why the Planning Commission found this to be a clear and objective standard that required contiguity between lots, and that there is no language in other than the definition of lot that suggests any ability to borrow lot area from a non-contiguous lot. So again, there was no ambiguity in the term lot area from the Planning Commission's perspective. Appeal issue 3 is that modification of an approved site plan allows for a shared lot area, and this is the idea that the appellant's making the argument that because this is a modification of a site plan, they should be able to look at the parent parcel, and therefore they're not sharing lot area at all. If we looked at this through the lens of 2017, this was all one big parcel, so you know they're not sharing lot area, or you know, in any non-contiguous way. The Planning Commission's focus was on the language of the code itself, which talks about lot area definition, and on a lot, which was created by a subdivision approval and not a site plan and conditional use application. Lot 2 and 7 were created by a separate subdivision in 2017 and cannot be undone through a site plan modification. So those are the three appeal issues. And the final point I want to make is that unlike other types of applications where there is needed housing and conditions of approval are identified that would allow, conditions of approval could be imposed on an application that could result in compliance with the criteria, the council has to approve with conditions. In other types of applications, the council has discretion. They can deny or they can go with the approval with conditions. But that is not the case with needed housing. If there are conditions identified that result in compliance, the council must approve. So the applicant has identified 2 additional conditions of approval. One, reducing the number of units from 67 to 65 in order to accommodate an easement. And there's no dispute that easement area does not count as part of lot area. So that one is one of those things that if you decide that aggregation of lot area is permitted, then condition one would be appropriate. Condition 2 that the applicant is suggesting is recording a restrictive covenant prohibiting the construction of any additional dwelling units on lots 2 and 7. So this would resolve the issue of borrowing multiple times. So they would effectively deplete the bank of available residential unit lot area for both of these lots. So that is what they are recommending there. A couple of additional points that I want to mention as the council considers this appeal. First, again, the role of the council is to review the Planning Commission's decision for error pursuant to the issues raised in the appeal. So we need to keep the analysis to this essentially one basket of issues. Second, the high-density residential dimensional standards in SDC 16010030 were amended in the fall of 2021. And so this question about whether or not lot area is a dimensional requirement was resolved through those 2021 code amendments. So that concern is probably not likely to come before the city council again. That said, the lot area definition was not addressed. So this question of borrowing lot area from non-contiguous lots may come up again theoretically. Finally, you need to know that because there is essentially one basket of issues that was the basis for denial by the Planning Commission, if you are to decide to affirm the Planning Commission's decision so that essentially it is a denial for this lack of sufficient lot area determination and the matter is appealed to LUBA, if LUBA agrees with the appellant, the applicant, that the city got it wrong, the result will likely be that LUBA will reverse the decision. And when cases where LUBA reverses an application, the LUBA has an obligation, if the city acted outside of its range of discretion, to grant attorney fees to the challenger. So there is a greater degree of attorney fee exposure to the city in this case than there would be in a more run-of-the-mill type of LUBA appeal. And there are examples where even where a city does not take an active role in defending the case at LUBA, they've still had to pay the attorney fees when it's a reversal. That kind of circumstance would come up if it were to turn out that LUBA finds that these standards are not clear and objective. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and alternatives. Okay, sorry. So the council alternatives are to tentatively affirm the Planning Commission decision and deny the application based on the Planning Commission findings report dated May 24th, 2022, and the city council's deliberation. That would be option A. Option B would be tentatively amend the planning commission decision and deny the application with additional amended findings of noncompliance. So if you wanted to do something different, we could do that. Option C would be tentatively reverse the planning commission's decision and adopt findings of compliance with those stated code sections, including any additional conditions of approval. In any of these options, the council should authorize the mayor to sign a notice of decision, including written findings consistent with the council's tentative decision on or before July 22nd. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have one. Why the word tentatively in all of these options?
Because we have not written findings explaining how the council's going to respond to the appeal issues, because we haven't heard from the parties yet. And so we don't have written findings to justify the decision.
Okay.
And then,
So then what would happen?
So the mechanics of what would happen?
I'm just trying to understand, the word tentatively leads me to believe there's some future action that
Right,
has to happen.
so the ending clause there would be you authorize Mayor Mays to sign the notice of decision with the written findings that
Okay.
would memorialize.
So staff would
your
write up
decision.
findings based on which option we choose, and then those would be executed by the mayor.
Yes,
Got it.
and
Okay.
if you don't want to do that, we have to call a special meeting in order to do it. Not that that's a threat or anything.
other questions?
I had one.
And we can have questions all night, but yes, because
Yeah, I think I can wait till after.
yeah.
I just, was the area of Lot 7 included when they developed Lot 7 as counting for their spaces that they needed for that?
I don't even understand the question.
I think I understand the question. So when
I
they
assume they needed a certain number of spots for Area 7.
what do you mean spots? Parking stalls?
Parking spots or lot size, right? Well, it's going to get there.
Parking has nothing to do with this.
Okay. All right.
But I understand your question. So for
Was the lot size used when qualifying them to build on Lot 7? I guess what I'm worried about is we've said, hey, we're not going to double count these, and so I just wanted to make sure, has it already been counted once in Lot 7 as allowing, when we, and I wasn't part of it back then, but when we approved Lot 7 to be built out, was the lot size used at that time and considered as part of the justification for being able to build out Lot 7?
Short answer is yes. So
Okay.
I guess two comments on that. When they did this, so the site plan approval of these three sort of parent parcels, it had a lot area for this, single parcel,
Right.
The large one, and then a subdivision occurred.
Right.
And so when that subdivision occurred, the findings for that subdivision listed 7 separate lots, right? That's how you do a
Right.
subdivision. So it met the lot area, this specific lot, Lot 7, met the lot area requirements for the retail commercial zone at the time of subdivision. And then a building
Yeah.
was placed on it or it was already on it.
Perfect.
And so, yes, the lot area, 100% of the lot area for Lot 7 was applied to meet the requirements of the retail commercial zone.
And when we were trying to determine that, we used length times width that's how we figured out what the area of it was.
We use the definition of lot area, yes.
Yeah, I know as a dimensional, I'm just wondering if
Yeah.
that was the methodology we used for
We
Lot
would have used the
7.
definition of lot area. I think the question on appeal is slightly different because it's about whether lot area even applies.
Yeah, no, I know.
My second comment would be that because this is a mixed-use zone and housing is also allowed in this zone,
Yeah.
that we would allow, let's say if Lot 7 came in they did the subdivision, created the lot under the retail commercial zone, but it was vacant. And then they wanted to do both commercial and residential, residential above. The way that we have processed those in the past is we would, apply the same underlying lot area to just for this lot though, to determine how many residential units they get on that property. They could still do mixed use, but in this case, they only did commercial, but 100% of the lot area from lot 7 was used to create that lot.
So just to follow up on that, so the theory in the borrowing, if you will, proposal is that had lot 7 been developed differently, they would have been able to build housing, let's say like you said, retail first floor housing above, but because it wasn't, that residential allotment now could be conceivably used in a different lot. Is that the theory that behind the borrowing? Because like lot 7's built, so why would there be any land area left?
So what the staff clarified during the Planning Commission decision and through the minutes and everything else was that the residential entitlements on lot 7 are not lost. They've developed the lot, and so it would be it wouldn't be fun for them to redevelop that site and do mixed use, but they could. The residential entitlements from lot 7 have not been lost, but they could. So they could. I think it's 16 units on lot 7 that they could do. But what Planning Commission said was, you can't transfer or combine those the residential.
I get that. I'm trying to understand the basic principle that the applicant is asking for. Why there would be even any units to transfer at all on a developed property, but you've now explained.
Staff would agree that you could redevelop these lots with, but again, it would have to be on each individual lot. Yep, exactly. Thanks.
Great. With that, let's hear from the applicant and appellant.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
I'll restart. Good evening, Mayor Mays, councilors. My name is Garrett Stevenson. I'm a land use lawyer representing the applicant in this case and also appellant. So basically, I think our presentation is going to come in two parts. And I'm going to go ahead and get started and talk about some of the legal issues here. But we've also got Brad Kilby from HHPR, who's our land use planning consultant, to talk about the project itself, because I don't want to lose sight of the fact it's a really cool project. We've also got with us tonight from Steve Deacon and Ian Llewellyn, as well as Wayne Kittleson, who is our traffic consultant, in case you have any questions of them. So the application before you, as staff mentioned, is a 65-unit multifamily development within the existing Cedar Creek Plaza. And staff found, and I don't want to lose sight of this either, that there's really only one fundamental disagreement here between us and the city, and that's what the unit count is. If you look at the rest of the application, and I think staff did a great job on going through the project as a whole, when we got the initial staff report prior to the Planning Commission hearing, I think we agreed with staff on virtually everything, and there's a lot more that goes into this than just unit count. So I want to be clear, this is not a situation where we got an application that failed on a number of different issues. Really, the fundamental issues with this application are exactly what Ms. Richter went over, and I think she did a great job of describing our fundamental argument here. Before turning to my legal points, I just want to give a couple observations and some context here. So both lots 2 and 7 were part of the original Deacon tract, and as Eric mentioned, you had 3 tracts that were part of the Cedar Creek Plaza initially. The Deacon Tract was really the heart and soul of the mixed-use retail commercial center. That was developed, and then, as is so often in these cases, the folks that developed on those parcels wanted to own them, and so it was ultimately subdivided and then sold. The whole area remains under the original 2017 site plan entitlement, and that's why we went back through, based on our discussions with staff, to do the major modification instead of a new application. Then, as now, we're talking about 2 lots within the same site plan approval. So from our standpoint, we don't think that there's a density transfer going on here. When I think of density transfer, I think of moving air rights between different buildings in downtown. That's not what we have here. All of this was originally approved as part of the same project, and it remains. And that is the decision that we are proposing to modify today. Staff has never taken the position that if we had a clean slate and it was bare ground, that we wouldn't be able to do exactly what we're doing today. So the questions before the council, I think, on this are thankfully fairly narrow. And I think, at least in the start of the project, staff and the applicant went into this with exactly that understanding. And I'm just going to quote from January 14th, 2022, a staff finding in the first staff report, I believe. It says as follows: while the city code does not have a process for transferring residential lot area entitlements, staff supports the approach because the proposed building is within the same commercial center subdivision as the other lots being borrowed from. Now, I don't necessarily agree that we're engaging in borrowing here, but I wanted to read that to you to let you know why we're where we are. We worked with staff on this considerably, and we didn't know that we had a problem with density until 7 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. That's when we got the staff report, which was the ultimate reason for the denial, I think, and the Planning Commission's reasoning there. So, and I understand that the city and that staff has the duty to interpret the code as it feels fit. But I wanted to give you that context. This is not some sort of harebrained scheme that the applicant has come up with to do something that it was advised not to do. Now, we are where we are, and I'm going to talk about our arguments. But I just don't think that this is a density transfer. What this is utilization of ownership of 2 lots that are in the same site plan development area, and that's certainly originally how we approached this. Before I jump into my 2 legal points, I want to talk about a question I think it was raised by Councilor Giles, and that's what could we do with this site? Has it been used up from a development standpoint? I want to be clear. The answer to that is no. You can double count essentially the area of a lot if you're doing mixed use. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So I can get the same number of units on a given piece of ground, assuming that the lot area standards apply, whether or not that piece of ground is already developed with a retail or commercial use, because that's what this zone is intended to allow us to do. It's a mixed-use zone. So I don't think that, and I think what Eric said was pretty much on point, which is that this is not a case where we've used up our development entitlement for residential. We haven't. So I just want to make sure that that's crystal clear. The 2 points, and I got to say that Ms. Richter summarized them really, really well, so I'm going to probably blow through these. But our objection to the Planning Commission's decision is really twofold. Number one, this is a needed housing application. And when we looked at this code, and this has been clear throughout the record as early as March, there's really no clear and objective link between the development standard requirements in the commercial retail zone and the standards of the HDR zone. And that's because the definition of the word dimension. It's not defined in the code, and what it says is look at the dimensional standards of the HDR when you're trying to develop housing in commercial retail zone. And section 16.10.010 of the city's code explains that in cases where you don't have a specific definition of a word in the code, you look to the dictionary. And I actually, yesterday, pulled out the dictionary, and I wanted to see what the definition of dimension is. And this is the same Webster's Third that the city code.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is not the dictionary definition a new fact that's not in the record?
A fact is the, so I can't,
You have to respond to the record.
We're reviewing just the record,
So what-
right? You
what
can
I- what
make
I would-
legal arguments,
yeah, so
but
what
I
I would-
don't think you can offer facts, so I'm just,
I don't think it's a fact because the city code directly refers to that dictionary. So you guys can choose to ignore it, but I'm going to say it anyway.
I'll just clarify, though. It says if, and you actually are right. It says if the definition is not listed in the code, then you do go to the Webster's.
Yeah,
That's
so
what the code says.
if there's a direct
1996.
link between the code and the dictionary, I would assume that I can still talk about the dictionary the same way I talk about the code. But at any rate, what the dictionary says is that the definition of dimension is a measure in a single line, such as length, breadth, depth, or thickness, one of three coordinates of a position, specifically the physical characteristics of length, breadth, or thickness. What it doesn't talk about is how a dimension is the same thing as area. And as Ms. Richter said, the table that we're referred to basically lists a whole bunch of development standards, but it doesn't call out the area as a dimensional standard. So I don't really have anything to add to that. That's basically an argument that we really don't have a dimensional, a specific density standard that applies under this version of the code. I do want to note, though, and this is in the record, that the city went back and amended its code to add exactly what is missing that I'm talking about here. So it went back and said, we are expressly now citing.
Is that on the, is that part of the record,
it is.
future action?
It
Okay.
is, and it's the same statement that I made earlier, that the code was amended in August of 2021 to eliminate the dimensional requirement confusion.
Great, thanks.
So, and we brought this up with the Planning Commission, but I think that at some point, I would guess, the city said, wow, that could be a lot clearer, and then they amended the code to make it clearer. So that's really the legislative context that we're looking at here. As far as the second legal issue that I think is really important here is what is a lot? Can we consider lots 2 and 7 together to be a lot? And for that, we just look to the definition in the city's code, which is in 1610.20, a single lot of record. This is the definition of lot, by the way, a combination of complete lots of record and portions of other lots of record. That seemed to us to be clear enough to suggest that, especially when we were talking about the same areas was originally approved, that we can certainly look at lots 2 and 7 as a single lot for this purpose. The idea that they need to be contiguous is just simply not found in the code. And believe me, I looked hard to find it because I wanted to know. You know, I can understand the way that staff is looking at it. I don't think it's a correct way to look at it, but I'm not also saying that it's, you know, not a patently unreasonable way to look at it. But when we're talking about needed housing, what the statutes say is that the code needs to be clear and objective on its face. And I don't think it's that when it comes to the lot area question. And I certainly don't think it's that when it comes to the link between the CR zone development standards and the HDR development standards. As far as the definition of lot area, that's just the total horizontal area within the lines of a lot. Two thoughts with that. Number one, the fact that we are measuring a horizontal area makes sense because we're not talking about height. But the other thing I would point out is that it still refers back to a lot. So if you want to know what a lot is, it kicks you back to the definition of lot that I just talked about earlier. And, you know, I did read staff's report, I read the Planning Commission findings, and I understand the policy concerns here. I don't think they're relevant in this particular instance for two reasons. Number one, those policy concerns, and what I'm talking about is the idea, well, if we do this, then other folks are going to try and do something similar. First of all, that's not a reason to deny an application for the development of housing, and the legislature has been clear about that. But the other thing I would point out, and I think Ms. Richter identified this pretty well, is that the code has been amended and that it's highly unlikely, and I could go out on a limb and say quite impossible based on how unusual this particular circumstance is, that this is ever going to be a question you guys face again. Certainly not in the same terms that you're talking about it now. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude my initial presentation and hand it over to Brad to give you a look at what we're trying to achieve here. Unless, of course, you have any questions.
So first, in regards to the contiguity or issue or non-issue.
Carrie, does this, when council asks the applicant, appellant, questions, does that consume part of their time?
It's up to the council's discretion, usually not.
I'm fine with it. So if you allow for this idea that you can have these non-contiguous lots all be defined as one lot, then what if you owned a lot clear on the other side of Sherwood? Would you be able to include that as part of the lot calculation?
I think my answer to that is no, which is probably the answer you were hoping to hear. But in this instance, what we have is an original site. I mean, I think my answer might be a little different if this were a standalone multifamily application, but I would sort of send you back to the context that I talked about at the beginning, which is how the applicant and staff, at least at that time, and I understand that that's changed, we're looking at the issue, which is that, well, this whole area was part of one unified development. And at one point it was, I can't recall whether it was one lot or three, but certainly when the original approvals for the uses on each particular site were made, the Deacon tract was one, unambiguously one lot.
Yes.
And so I don't think that the circumstances that we are dealing with here would come up again, except in this type of scenario where we're doing a major modification. We have an originally sort of master plan, single site, unified development, and we're just trying to change the entitlement of one of the lots from, I don't know what it was entitled for originally, presumably nothing to something.
Yep.
So I think that's my answer there.
Okay. I got a follow-up to that and then an additional question after that.
Sure.
So, go ahead.
But the other thing I would say is that I think that the equally clear argument is that the minimum lot areas, essentially the way that density is handled in that CR zone, do not apply under the old code. They clearly do under the new code. And so the council could presumably decide that, it's less comfortable with the lot area argument and is more comfortable with that argument. You could decide that because we know that argument's not going to come again because the code's been amended. But I'll let you ask your second question.
Yeah, and then I have a third one. So the follow-up question is did the original application ever include utilizing the area from one portion of the lot to build housing on a different portion of the lot, or did that come up after the lots had been subdivided?
The original application, from what I recall, did not include the development of housing.
Okay. So the idea of borrowing unit allowance from lots originally 3 and 7 and now just 7 to build onto lot 2 did not come up until after the subdivision had occurred.
I assume not, because there was no discussion of residential density at the time whatsoever.
Yeah, so that may change. I mean, to me, that potentially changes, right? Because now you have a subdivided situation. That was never part of the original application that you're amending, but that's a matter of debate.
Yeah.
I get, I subject. So the last question then is, and I think you just restated this, your contention is that there's because of this definition of dimensional requirements, it seems to be the position of the applicant now that there's essentially no limit to the amount of density or the amount of units that could be built, because you're saying that those standards don't apply. Am I understanding that
Yeah,
point
you're
correctly?
talking about kind of a slippery slope concept.
No. Just answer my question. So your argument earlier and in the paperwork submitted was that lot area is not a dimensional requirement, and therefore limiting the number of units based on lot area is essentially not something we're allowed to do. Am I reading that?
Yeah, so what you have in front of you is really three arguments in the alternative of all the reasons why we think that the plan.
Yeah, I just want to talk about that one.
In that particular one, if we want, so there would, I think you're saying, is there a scenario where we would come in with, say, 100 units?
No. I want you to answer the question that I asked.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the question.
I'm very clearly asking you to restate to me again in plain language the argument that you're saying that the lot area is not a dimension, and therefore the part of our code that says this,
Right.
you have to have this much lot area to accommodate this many units does not apply.
Yes, so our argument on the minimum lot area, which is essentially how that, I think, HDR zone was intended to regulate density, that does not apply to development within the CR zone. And so in theory, somebody under the old code could have come in and built in excess of that.
Okay,
that
so
number of
if
units.
that's your contention, then why did both the original application and the amended application, all conformed to that section of code if you didn't believe that section of code applied?
Well, there's two reasons for that. Number one, originally we came to an agreement with, because this goes through a long process, right, of project development. We always want to figure out what the city's thinking in terms of staff's reaction. And as we moved through this, staff said, well, this is how we're looking at it. And we said, okay, that's fine. We can live with those number of units. And so that's what we're going to propose. When that changed, it's incumbent on us to bring up every argument that we believe is correct on why the Planning Commission's decision is wrong.
But you didn't do that when you guys voluntarily, after I think a hearing, removed Lot 3, because I think there was some question around whether Lot 3 could or could be included. You guys, I think, eventually agreed not to include it for whatever reasons, and then you reduced your development from 80-something units to 60-something units. Wouldn't you at that time have made the argument that lot area doesn't apply and we should still be able to build the 80-something units we want to build? Why would you go all through the work of reducing to meet a code that you don't think applies?
Well, I can't speak to that decision because I wasn't involved in that particular decision. But from what I recall, the real reason for that decision was we don't have the participation of that landowner, and that causes some serious practical problems.
But it wouldn't matter. If you don't need the lot area, it wouldn't matter.
So you're asking me about why a decision was made?
No, I'm asking you why throughout the process have you agreed that this limit matters, and only now on appeal are you saying it doesn't matter?
Because I think that our interpretation of the code is correct, and I think it justifies reversal of the Planning Commission decision. And B, we've not been inconsistent on this. There was a memo that was submitted into the record long before I was involved that made this exact point. Whether the applicant chooses to cooperate with what staff and the neighbors want to do, and out of good, essentially to be cooperative, reduce that number of units, that's a separate question, and that's really a project management, project design question. But regardless of how the application and the design developed, I think that our argument is correct. And I don't think I'm precluded from making it simply because
Any other questions for the applicant? I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I just, I know that we're not supposed to ask lawyers to do math. I'm an engineer. And so I'm not going to ask you to do a lot of math, but
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but just in defining a dimension, right? A point has no dimension, a line has a dimension, one dimension only, a plane has two dimensions. And I'm struggling a little bit here in trying to find another definition of site area or lot area or anything in all of my math and science courses and anything that defines an area as anything other than a measurement of dimensions. And to call that into question, to say, well, it's vague, it's been understood for millions of years, right? That things have dimension, right? And so I'm wondering what's giving you the basis for saying it's not clear what an area is, or a lot area, like how we would find that.
Sure. So I don't think the math is vague. I think that the code that we're dealing with is vague on whether that math applies the way that the Planning Commission says it does. A dimension, and all I can say is that a dimension is measured in square feet or square meters.
Yeah.
Area is measured in square feet or square meters, and a dimension is measured in lineal feet or lineal meters.
Right.
So, when we look at this, and that's why I looked at the definition, I don't think that area is precisely defined as a dimensional standard. You may disagree with that, but when I read the code, there wasn't a clear explanation that density standard in the HDR zone, as it's embraced through the lot area calculations, applied in the commercial retail. Because remember, we're dealing with a code that just simply kicks you to a code reference. And it would have been very helpful if I opened it up and instead of it saying development standards, it said dimensional standards and here's what they are. But that's not what the code says. The code has since been changed to make that clear. So I just want to, I'm not disagreeing with you about what how you would measure something.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is the codified link between one zoning code, the CR zone, and the HDR zone.
Okay.
Sean, do you have any questions?
All right, none. No.
Thanks, Sean.
Mr. Mayor, we're actually not finished.
I know you're not.
Oh, okay.
I just had a quick question, piggybacking on Councilor Scott down there. When Lot 3 raised the question and said we shouldn't be included in this because you no longer own us, did they demand or suggest that because they're removing themselves that you need to reduce your number of units?
Oh, yeah. So Brad's telling me no. I wasn't involved in that particular discussion, so I'll go with what Brad said. But
So then you guys chose to, based on what our code says could be on lot, if we were to allow lot 7 and 2, you reduced it to that, even though lot 3 wasn't saying, hey, you can't have that many because we're going to pull out.
They did say that, but that's not why we reduced the lots. That's what I'm saying. They did say that.
Okay.
All right, so that's the end of our questions, I think, at this point, so continue.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Good to see you again. Brad Kilby for the applicant. I'm a planning manager for HHPR, and I was the prior planning manager here at City of Sherwood. Good to see you all, those of you that I've seen before, or that I've worked with before. Anyways, I wanted to respond real quick to you, Councilor Scott. It's a good faith neighborhood. Like, not all developers are bad. So if they feel like they're going to get a lot of, pushback on something, they're going to try and make their development work. And specifically if there's some ambiguity or some, like if there's a lot of people calling out different conflicts of things within your code, they're going to try and meet the least path of resistance to get an approval. And that's especially, in my mind, meaningful in a place like Sherwood. Like, there hasn't been a lot of multifamily development, and not any within a mixed-use commercial development developed in the city of Sherwood. So this is their first go at it. So they're going to do this. Yes, there was a proposal behind the Ross, but that went away, and now they couldn't do that because of the way the code has been amended, insinuating that that's not a good planning thing. I would have argued.
We do have mixed use in town already.
I'm not saying you don't have mixed use, but very, very few approved mixed-use residential properties. And I would say, what, one? Is that the one down? And I guess it's really not.
Facts.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Sorry.
I appreciate it, Carrie. Thanks.
Just real quick, and so I wanted to respond to that. I mean, they're not bad people. They're trying to make things happen. And I was going to say, to your point on Lot 7, it's an underdeveloped lot. That means that they could come in and they could develop housing there. And this was all developed as one single development. They share parking, they share access, they share lighting, they share utilities. They already share everything within this mixed-use development. There were 3 parent parcels. It's very common within a commercial development to have a commercial developer divide. I guarantee you that Safeway has several lots, because that's what you do when you develop a mixed use and a retail center, is you align your lots so that people can sell and invest into that. So I just wanted to say, and then I would argue that, like, changing your code insinuates, to clarify something, insinuates that it was ambiguous and not clear and objective in the first place. And so you're clarifying that. I wanted to talk real quick just from a planning perspective, because I am very passionate about housing, and I think it's super important that people understand the value and why we need more housing. This is a lot. I think Eric did a great job of explaining what was going on there. I don't need to go over that. We've done this. We went to 65 units to be good neighbors, to 67 units to be good neighbors. We saw that Lot 3 was going to fight this and object to it. So we didn't want to have that fight. We didn't choose that fight. We chose to, okay, we'll reduce our number of units. I want to go through really quick on the amenities for this. This is the overall site plan that was concluded for that original site plan. And we're asking for a major modification to that site plan, which included all of these lots, including the 3 parent parcels. The site amenities. This is good planning. It's walkable. You've got an on-site dog park. It's access to other services, restaurants, gym, retail, the medical center, the assisted living facility. It's going to be a professionally managed development. Building amenities. This is exactly what you want to see in multifamily housing. You want to see a lobby that actually has some space for people to commune in. It has an interior courtyard, so open space that is away from all of the commercial uses and interior to the development. You have covered patios. You have a mailroom that's interior to the site. You have interior bike storage, so you don't have bike storage outside where it's going to be stolen by people. And I mean, that's important when you're talking about a mixed-use development, because you want it away from any type of temptation for people to take it out. Rooftop patio and community room, would be the first rooftop patio that I would know of in Sherwood. And on-site parking for all units and visitors are provided on Lot 2. By going to 65 units, and there are 92 spaces provided. The site plan only shows 90, but there were 2 on the side that had a weird note, and the architect didn't count them. There are actually 92 spaces on the site. And you're under the mixed-use standard, they're required to provide 87. This is 5 more than that. So there was a question in the Planning Commission whether or not other people from the rest of the development, based on the CC&Rs, could park into the site. Well, there's 5 parking spaces where that could potentially happen, but the developer has met the minimum and plus some. And then apartment amenities themselves. So I've looked at the apartments. It's quality construction, wood plank flooring, granite countertops, wood cabinets, stainless steel appliances, in-unit washers and dryers. These are market rate. They're not affordable, which unfortunately people are.
Is this,
These in the plans? Is this clear that these are in the plans?
Amenities are. I'm sorry. I don't think they're in the floor plan.
Yeah. But yeah, because you're selling the project now, so that wasn't in the record before.
Well, and okay, so let's ignore what the apartment's going to look like on the inside. But they were never, they've always been said that they would be market rate. Think about what you would want in a market rate housing. There is a demonstrated need in the city of Sherwood, has been for a long time, for multifamily housing. This provides multifamily housing in a good location that allows residents to age in place. That's another important thing that people need to think about. When your parents no longer want to live in Woodhaven because their lots are too big and their kids are all gone off to college or something, they want a different place in Sherwood. They want to stay in Sherwood, go to Cruise Inn. They got to have a place, right? So this would provide a great place for them. In the same vein, your children go to college. You want them to come back and work in your community. You want your community to last a long time, to grow. If it doesn't grow, it dies. So you allow another housing option for them to come back to you. They can't afford to buy a house right out of college. I mean, some may, I suppose. And it's a good location for multifamily housing because it's near downtown. It's got good access to transit and access to the services that I spoke to before. And mixed use is, in my mind, a good thing. And this would be good for Sherwood. I hope that you guys affirm our appeal and overturn the Planning Commission's decision because those were not clear and objective standards that were being applied. Thank you.
Great. Anyone wishing to give testimony on the applicant's appeal? It's here, or Mark?
Mayor Mays, can I confirm that I've got about 9 minutes for rebuttal?
Correct. Thank you. Welcome, Mark. Please state your name and address for the record. The green light is on.
Mark White. I live at 17117 Southwest Robinwood Place, Sherwood. My wife and I have been opposed to this development since the beginning, since day one. The reasons why: we overlook the plaza. We use the plaza every day, and we walk through it daily, and we understand as neighbours how bad this development will be. Not only for the plaza, for the neighbourhood, and for Sherwood, for our neighbourhood. We have provided evidence at every stage during this process, including the last hearing where we provided 2 code-related reasons why, in our opinion, this development was correctly denied by the Commission. Your own planning density calculations say Lot 2 can only support 46 units, not 67 or 65 as they've just changed it. The developer is trying to bypass these calculations by using Lot 7 and density transfer in his calculations. And my understanding is that density transfer is not allowed under the Sherwood planning process. Therefore, it was correctly denied. There are many other reasons as far as I'm concerned why, and I disagree that the previous code was ambiguous. It clearly says multi-family housing subject to dimensional requirements of the high-density residential zone in 161230 when located on upper floors, in the rear of, or otherwise clearly secondary to commercial buildings. This development is not located on upper floors, it's located on all floors. The development uses the entire lot 2, therefore it can't be in the rear of everything. It will extend past the end of lot 3, Mud Bay, and therefore it will be in front of the IHOP, the opticians, and the hops and drops. Lastly, in my opinion, it clearly would not be secondary. It would be the primary part of the plaza, not secondary. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no ambiguity to the code, even though it has been clarified. There are many other numerous, as far as we're concerned, common sense reasons why the development will have a negative effect on our neighbourhood and the plaza and Sherwood. Traffic congestion has to be applied at the intersection. Parking and parking conflicts will occur. And these are just a few. So, to conclude, we're not adverse to the development of Lot 2, but as we've stated since day one, this is simply the wrong development in the wrong place and was correctly denied by the Commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Christopher, welcome. Please state your name and address in the record.
No, I just want to clarify, I believe you're representing 4 individuals, so at 3 individuals, so at commission, you had a total of 16 minutes, which included yourself. So if council is okay with that, we would provide 4 minutes for each person that he's representing plus himself. But I think that decision is up to you. Is that right, Carrie? Up to the council?
Christopher, is that correct that you're representing multiple people?
I'm representing three different individual owners in the center, HC LLC, Jaffe Sherwood LLC, and Bob Barman.
Okay. Do you need more than?
I don't need 16 minutes, but I would appreciate a few more than 4.
Okay. I'm supportive without objection. Okay.
I'm not sure what our rules say. So.
Okay.
I will be succinct. Chris Koback, 1125 Northwest Cooch, Suite 550, Portland 97209. And as I mentioned, I represent 3 individual owners within Cedar Park. We participated throughout the process. And I want to start by saying this probably is a good development. It sounds like it's got good amenities. It sounds like it's an asset. It would be all of that if it had 46 units. And the kicker is it would meet the clear standards of your code. It would beat the lot area. What you didn't hear is why doesn't it work with 46 units? And I guess it could be lower if the 2,000 feet for the easement's taken out, but I'll leave staff to that. So your staff did a great job analyzing the legal issues, and I'm not going to restate everything, but the one thing I want to start with is the argument that you cannot interpret your code to determine what standards apply. We don't believe that invokes the needed housing statute at all. We believe the city council, as the governing body, retains the right to interpret your code. ORS 1978291, talking about the standard of review at LUBA, specifically states that. And your interpretations, if plausible and not inconsistent with the text of the code, is given deference when it's reviewed. And so when you look at the first question is, it's clear that housing, multifamily housing, is allowed subject to dimensional standards. There's no question, that's clear. The only question is, what is a dimensional standard in that zone under your code? That's where we believe you have the right under the law to interpret your code to determine that. And if you look at how you would do that, you would look at 1612.030, and the first provision says no lot area, setback, yard, landscape area, open space, off-street parking, loading area, or other site dimension or requirement may be reduced below the minimum. And so clearly there's two subsets in that general provision. There are dimensional site dimensions, and there are requirements. And then when you go to the operative table, the only thing on that table, I know it's labeled development standards, but every item on there is a dimensional standard. It's all something you can measure, as Councilor Giles said. It's feet or square feet. And so I don't think it's a stretch. It's beyond plausible to conclude and interpret your code that these are the dimensional standards. The things that are missing are the other requirements. They're left out of these dimensional standards, like parking, landscaping, lighting. Those requirements are not here. Everything that the drafters decided to put in here are dimensional standards. Now, and this came up, the applicant, I think, even agrees with that, because the applicant agreed that lot width and lot depth are dimensional standards. And I heard it here. I've said it in writing before, and I said it to the Planning Commission. I don't think you can get to the conclusion that lot area is not a dimensional standard if you accept that it's a product of 2 dimensional standards, lot width and lot depth. And the other point I just heard here is that it's important to note that under the applicant's interpretation, not only would lot area not be a dimensional standard, setbacks aren't either. But if you go back and carefully read back what they said the definition is, it's a straight line measurement. They want you to accept Webster. Webster said it's a, I think I wrote it down, it's a measurement of a single line. Well, that's a setback. So their argument is a little inconsistent because they're saying setbacks aren't dimensional standards, yet a setback is squarely within the definition they want you to use from Webster. So on the first issue, is this a dimensional standard that applies? Clearly, it is under your code, and you can make that finding and that interpretation, and it will be upheld. Second standard, is it clear and objective? This is where the needed housing comes in, because the needed housing statute just says only standards, conditions, and requirements that are clear and objective can be applied. So the interpretation of what applies, well, as I just said, that's not subject to the statute. What is the standard once you determine what it is. So is this lot area clear and objective? It's a measurement. It's simple math. And in Luba and the Court of Appeals have said, just because you have to do some analysis, mathematical analysis, like an averaging of a setback, that doesn't make it less than clear and objective. So that answers the first question. The second issue on lot, I think the applicant misses a big part of the definition. It starts with a lot is a parcel of land of at least sufficient size to meet the minimum zoning requirements of this code. So again, even if you're applying needed housing statute, you have to apply it in context. That's what the LUBA has said and the court. You have to apply it in context. So what we're talking about is a single parcel of land that is of sufficient size for minimum zoning. So you have to apply your standards to something. Then it goes on and it says it may include more than one lot of record. Well, let's look at it in context. We know that a lot of record may be a legal lot sufficient for development, but not always. Because a lot that's created before the current standards might be a lot of record because it was created when it was lawful. It may not meet the standards now. And so I think what your code defining lot gives you the ability to do, an applicant to do, is if they own more than one lot of record that are contiguous, they can join those together as one development site because you can apply your code to it. You can apply your standards. You can apply your setbacks, your front yard standards, your lot area standards, your lot coverage standards. All of that can be applied, but it doesn't give you the right to take a lot from this part of town and a lot from this part of town and say they're all the same lot when I want them to be. But yet, if I want them to be different, I would say under ORS 92.017, they're legally separate for all other purposes. I can sell them separately, I can treat them separately when I want, but I can, if it helps me on a development standard, I can say it's a single lot. I don't believe that's a plausible interpretation. I think a more plausible interpretation is the one we're advocating for, which is a lot must be a single parcel of land sufficient to meet development standards. The last thing is I want to briefly talk about is the notion that because this was once a development, a single development, you really can ignore these subdivision lines. And again, this is in my written material, but if you look at ORS 92.017, it's a really important statute. It states that when lawful lines are created, they're inviolate. They remain until they're removed by a lawful process. Those lot lines mean something. And the applicant benefited from having those individual lots because they needed to do that to sell and make money. And now, unfortunately, it appears instead of sticking with the code and going with 44 or 46 units, which would be a great development and meet the code, there's an angle to get more money. And we don't believe that's proper. My clients have raised all these issues. They say they want to be good neighbors. My clients have explained to them that this site, Lot 2, is not appropriate for this scope of development. It will have significant negative effects on their businesses, yet they won't change it for us. We don't believe that's being a good neighbor. So unless there are questions, that'll conclude my testimony.
Thanks, Christopher. David? Welcome, David. Please state your name and address to the record.
Sure thing. My name is David Peterson. My address is 888 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1600, Portland, 97204. I'm here representing one client, Lake Bowman LLC, which is the owner of Lot 3, and I'm sure I won't need 8 minutes, so I won't even need 4, quite frankly, because Mr. Kobach stole my thunder. He made the primary argument I wanted to make, so I'm going to just maybe fill in a few cracks on that. And I think the applicant is overextending the applicability of the clear and objective rules with respect to needed housing. It's not like the legislature came out and said, now anytime you're proposing housing, that the entire code of the applicable jurisdiction has to be read under this clear and objective umbrella. It's the standards that you apply that have to be clear and objective. It's the dimensional requirements that have to be clear and objective. And my client's position in alignment with Mr. Kobach's clients is that lot area is exceedingly clear and objective. But the path by which the council gets to the conclusion that the lot area standard applies, that's not a question of clarity and objectivity. That's a question of code interpretation, which is your ultimate obligation here as the enactors and enforcers of the code. So Ms. Richter in her staff report kind of goes through this, and she says if you're going to adopt the interpretation of your code, the pathway through 1612.030 to or 1622.020 to 1612.030, where the dimensional requirements are listed, that's a question for you to interpret your code in a plausible manner. And what her staff report says is that if you interpret it in the applicant's manner, you end up with this nonsensical conclusion, nonsensical path. And the applicant suggests, well, nonsensicality is not an issue here, or that's not our obligation to not be nonsensical, but it's your obligation to not be nonsensical. And so I think you can follow the staff's advice and follow the recommendations of Mr. Kobach and say that, we plausibly conclude via A, B, and C that lot area is a dimensional requirement. Lot area applies to this proposal, and it's clear and objective, and we're going to apply it. And that's where you get to. The last thing I want to point out is just something that has been touched on, I believe, in the staff report, but not here, and it's just, I would like the council to be sure they notice that the applicant is advocating for different interpretations of lot as it suits them. Okay, they want the lot to be 2 non-contiguous parcels when that gets them enough density to meet the lot area requirement, but those things are not a lot in the applicant's mind for things like setbacks or, setbacks I guess would be the primary one, but other lot dimension standards. So, there's a maximum of construction that says a single term should be given the same definition throughout, unless the statute, the code otherwise says, indicates that it should be given a different meaning for a particular purpose. And that's not the case here. So if a lot is going to be a lot, the lot is going to mean the same thing all the way through. And interpreting the definition of lot in your code and interpreting the definition of lot area in your code follows the same analysis I just talked about. It's your responsibility to come up with a plausible definition that's going to be subject to, entitled to deference at LUBA. And that's not a question of clarity and objectivity. That's a question of what does your code mean and what does the city council intend that it means. That's all I have.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to give testimony on this? All right, applicant appellant, you have another, 922 to respond to that testimony, or anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll probably try to keep it relevant and keep it short. You've heard quite a few different views on the same material, and I want to say that, again, this is not the product of an applicant trying to maximize something that it wasn't told it could otherwise do. We're in this situation because we developed a project based on the advice of staff, and that advice changed right before the Planning Commission hearing. And so we've been very consistent with our view of the code. To Councilor Scott's question, again, we submitted a memo as early as March. I can't remember if that was 21 and 22. I didn't do the memo, but it did talk about this dynamic with the code. So this is not the first time that the Planning Commission heard it, for sure. We've been very consistent. The reason why, as Brad said, that we do what we do with the project is because when staff says, well, I can agree with that, but maybe not this other thing, I mean, we never wanted to build 150 units out there. We wanted to build what we proposed. And so that's why you didn't see a proposal in front of you for some, thing that was way off the mark, something that we said, by God, this code can't apply, so we're going to build, some ungodly number of units. No, I mean, what we were looking to do is build what you see in front of you, and we rely on, on a project development process that says, all right, here's what we think we're going to run into, and we think it's best to say, fine, if you believe that you can find, and I've read the finding, it's in my letter as well from staff, if you believe that you can find that we satisfy the code in that way, that's what we're going to propose. So I don't think this is a question of, us flip-flopping or something like that. And I just want to be very clear on that. As far as the specific arguments go, I don't have a whole lot to say about Mr. Kobach and Mr. Peterson's testimony. One of the things, though, that Mr. Kobach said that I thought was interesting is that it must be a dimension if it can be measured. Now, that's just not right. If the city wanted to say that it's any measurable standard, it would have just said that, and that's what the table would have said. So obviously we disagree with Mr. Kobach and Mr. Peterson on the question of whether or not it's clear and objective. When you open that code book, can you immediately tell what a dimensional standard is when it sends you to a table of development standards? Okay, which one of those are dimensions? Reasonable minds can differ. You've heard our position on this. The question about the inviolability of lot lines, that's not an issue at all because we're not changing any lot lines here. The question is one of interpretation of the city's code. Mr. Peterson made the point that that LUBA believes, or I assume this was his point, that the entire code need not be clear and objective, and that might be so, but the city is obligated only to apply clear and objective standards and procedures. So there is no non-clear and objective standards, procedures, criteria, what have you, that the city can legally apply to the application. That is very clear from LUBA. So with that, there's a question about context. And fair enough. So let's look at a couple of other sections of the city's code. If you look at 16.60.040, and I promise you this is not new evidence, it says if a lot or parcel or aggregate continuous or the aggregate of contiguous lots or parcels recorded or platted prior to the effective date of this code has an area or dimension which does not meet the requirements of the code, the lot or aggregate of lots may be put to use permitted outright subject to the other requirements of the zone in which the property is located. So here's an example of the city's own code using the terms lot area and lot dimension separately. Okay. When you look at 16.68.020, again, if you look at sub A1, and I quote, the resulting lot sizes and dimensions are not less than 85% of the standard minimum lot area of the zone. So at best, the code's own context on this question is equivocal. There's certainly parts that you've heard tonight where staff believes that the lot area must be a dimension, and therefore it is, but there's other sections of the code that clearly use those words separate, or those concepts separately. And certainly I would never disagree with an engineer on the math, but I don't believe, as I mentioned earlier, that the textual piece of the code that would send you to that math clearly does what staff and the Planning Commission think it does. So that's all I have for rebuttal. I want to thank the council very much for its time. I want to thank Eric and Carrie for a great staff report, and thank you for hearing us out tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, and with that, we will close the public hearing on this appeal, and if with council's blessing, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Good.
So questions from council of staff?
I don't know how handy this would be to pull it up, but during testimony, I think it was from Mr. Kovacs, I think he brought up a definition from our code where I think the wording was single lot, or can you read that?
Sure. It is quoted on.
And what section of the code it's in? Yeah.
It's in the definitions of the code.
Okay.
It says, lot, a parcel of land with at least sufficient size to meet the minimum zoning requirements of this code and with frontage on a public street or easement approved by the city. A lot may be a single lot of record or a combination of complete lots of record or complete lots of record and portions of other lots of record.
Okay.
And then there's a sub B that says a parcel of land described by meets and bounds, provided that for a subdivision or partition, the parcel shall be approved in accordance with this code. And that meets and bounds discussion was part of the planning commission's decision. Was, can it be described by a meets and bounds description without the listing of your pencils starting out?
Right. I'm going back to the first one. And can you read just the first part of the first one again?
A single lot of record. Or a combination of complete lots of record.
No, it was like, I think it was the very first part of that section. I thought it was different. But a parcel, yeah.
A parcel of land of at least sufficient size.
Yeah, so when you say a parcel, that's what's really clicking with me. Like a parcel. Like, I don't know how you go from a parcel to two separate things being a parcel. Like that's what's stuck in my head here. But, okay, thank you. Are we in deliberation?
Yeah, well, we can ask whatever, any questions we want.
Procedures, we're going to have final comments by staff and then compare it to the.
Okay.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Do you mind
Thanks,
if I
Gary.
give a few final comments?
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Mays. So first thing, I just want to clarify, and this is all either in the record or evident based on the timeline. The appellant keeps referring to a memo that they submitted saying very early on that the lot area standards or the dimensional requirements were not clear and objective. I just want to clarify that. Initially, that letter came in prior to the applicant actually submitting for the application. So they did a pre-app. We indicated that and this is a pre-app notice, that the maximum lot area would be whatever it is, 46 units. They then responded with that memo saying that we couldn't apply the lot area standards because they weren't clear and objective. Staff then responded to that outside of the application and said, no, that the lot area, very clearly does apply, but we think potentially you can use these other lots as well. So they went ahead and they acknowledged and agreed that lot area applied, and they submitted the application, the original application, not with that memo, but just a pure application that indicated that lot area applied, and they were going to get there with lots 3 and 7. So I just want to clarify that. And then I think the timing was when they, either after release of the denial staff report or much later in the process, they brought that memo back into the record. So I just want to clarify that staff has been consistent from the beginning, even during the pre-app, that lot area applies to this project. We have not wavered on that. What the change was that staff no longer believed that lot 3 and lot 7 could be included in the record. And that was really in response to the Planning Commission questions that were raised during the continued hearings. We got questions of, is this a density transfer? Do we allow a density transfer? And so in response to that, we took a really close look at the code. We brought on Carrie and really looked at it, much closer, and came to the conclusion that indeed they couldn't use lot 3 and 7. So that was the only change in the staff decision. But we've been very clear since the beginning that lot area applies, and the applicant applied originally with that understanding. Second point I'd like to make is that the code update has addressed this question about dimensional requirements and what is a dimensional requirement. It's very clear in the code update that everything in the HDR zone applies to multifamily housing in the RC zone. What the code did not address is this question about what constitutes a lot. And so under the applicant's or appellant's argument, it's not really clear whether under their argument, if it's the subdivision that allows the transferring, or if it's the original site plan that allows the transferring mechanism. I think either way, that's a problem for us. If we had, and it's not clear if it's just a commercial subdivision or just a residential subdivision, under the argument, it's not really clear. If we have just a pure residential subdivision, 50 lots, can lot area be transferred within that? Or we could get a very large site plan with a commercial subdivision attached to it, and as part of that, under this argument, they could transfer lot area, freely between that after a subdivision. So there's just a lot of situations that become very problematic for us if we were to agree to this interpretation. In my opinion, that the code update doesn't really address it. It addresses a lot of it, but it does not address this question of what constitutes a lot, and that's just concerning. The third point I would like to make is that the site plan does allow for shared almost everything, shared parking, shared landscaping, et cetera, but it's very clear in the code that there's a mechanism to allow that. It basically, it encourages that, or it allows that, because it just makes sense. It, in our opinion, does not allow for that same opportunity with lots and lot sizes. It's clear parking, okay, it would be a good idea in a lot of situations to sort of share parking amongst a commercial center. I don't think that applies to lot area. So I just want to make that case. Just because other aspects of the development can be shared through a site plan, it does not automatically extend to lots. And it's very clear in the code when you can actually do those things, parking, landscaping, whatever it is. And then finally, I think the applicant's argument is really, it's based on just a really just one sentence in the retail, in the high density code that talks about, this differentiation between lot area and dimensions. I mean, their whole argument about not being clear and objective is based on that one sentence. And when you just take it in context, you go back to the HDR zone, it's very clear that more than just lot width and depth were intended to be applied to housing in retail commercial zones. And so to just look at this one sentence and then throw everything out the window doesn't seem like a good approach to implementing our code. And that's all I have, unless Carrie has anything.
So Carrie, Eric, either of you, why did the Planning Commission deny it versus approve it with changes, saying, okay, we think you can do this, but you need to reduce the number to blank, or any other things that they think, why did they not approve it with conditions that modified the project?
Yeah, good question. So first, the staff report had a pretty clear path forward for the applicant to get to an approval with 46 units or whatever it was by removing lot 7. So we had an extra time in the process to have them revise the plans, come back to Planning Commission 2 weeks later and get an approval for, or if Planning Commission agreed, for just utilizing lot 2. So that's the first point. It's very clear that the applicant could have taken that opportunity. The reason why Planning Commission didn't condition them down is because of the design changes that would have been required to the building. When you're going from 84 to 67, the applicant was able to maintain the same footprint and mostly the building design. And so when you keep dropping it down further, you could lose a story, you could have to shrink the building. And so the building would have had to been reviewed again by staff after, and that just kind of takes it out of the whole public process. And so the change to the building as a result of the unit reduction was too great, and it would have had to come back to Planning Commission for review, and we didn't have time.
Great. Other questions of staff?
But had they taken the one alternative to reduce it themselves, staff would have had to review the building. They would have had to bring it to you with the building reduced and.
Yeah, so we released a staff report and said we recommend a denial. However, if the applicant chooses, they could revise the plans and propose 45 units and have that reviewed on or before X date by Planning Commission. But we asked them, specifically, we said we'd love to get the project approved. Does 46 units work? And the answer was a pretty strong no.
Other questions?
A suggestion.
Yeah.
So there's three areas of appeal, right? So I propose we go through them one at a time. Maybe pull them up on the screen, discuss each one at a time, and then.
I'm fine with that.
Just so we don't bounce back and forth between the different issues.
Well,
I mean, from what I've heard, what I've read, I support staff and the findings of the Planning Commission. Would defer to staff to craft the language for the final findings.
Do you need direction on whether we support all three of those, two of the three, one of the three, none of the three?
If you want to give me that information, we will work it into the findings. If you want to support the Planning Commission's decision generally, I'm going to revise the Planning Commission's findings to include the additional sort of nuanced elements of the arguments that were presented here. There are just minor changes between what was presented tonight and what was presented to the Planning Commission. So, but if you want if you want a specific finding with respect to one of the appeal issues, yes, I'd like to hear it, so we make sure we.
Clearly an important finding is we are supportive of housing. We are supportive of multifamily housing. We are supportive of projects that meet the code, that is clear and objective. Unfortunately, the applicant didn't submit an application. This is me speaking, did not submit an application that met the clear and objective standards. We encouraged the applicant to adjust their application to meet the staff's suggestion to meet the clear and objective standards for Lot 2. But they didn't have time, they refused to extend, they chose not to. I think that's an important element to be part of what you put together.
No, that's the kind of direction that's helpful, sure.
And I was going to just add to it, a big fan of the middle housing and all of that as well. I think that doing it in the right way so that it fits into that community and, the neighborhoods and everything else is what, what we're here for. And especially as we're making a good, I believe that staff made a good faith estimate in hearing and being near it and all of the other. I don't think that there was, an intent to, mislead or leave it to the last minute or anything. It seems like it was very, they were very helpful in this instance. So I'm 100% in alignment with what the mayor has said.
If they had not subdivided the project, and if the owner still owned all the parcels, then you might have a very different conclusion here. But they created individual lots. They sold them off.
Eric, can you bring up
They made choices.
Can you bring up the deck with the three things on it?
The city council alternatives of that, or
no, the three areas of appeal.
It has the three numbers on it of which lot.
No, the reason
issues.
for appeal.
Okay, so this one I think is clearly I clearly side with the Planning Commission on this one. I think it's plainly obvious to me that lot area is a dimensional requirement. It's always been a dimensional requirement. The applicant submitted a regular or primary and original and a revised estimate or plan that also agreed with this. Everyone that I've ever heard of who's ever submitted an application with us has agreed that it's a dimensional requirement. So for me, this one, I completely agree that it stands. What's the next one? This one I was really struggling with until we got to that section of code that I had you read back to me. And when a parcel of land, it just that really clicked in my brain. It seems clear that the code intent and language both imply contiguity. If it doesn't say that directly, it's implicit within the entire code and the context of the code as the way it's written. So to me, I would affirm the decision of Planning Commission on this issue as well. And then the next one. I don't think we talked a lot about this one today. I think it goes back to the contiguity again, but I kind of side with the mayor. If this was still a single lot, this probably is a different question, but it's not a single lot anymore. And I mean, because it was at one point in time when a different site plan was submitted that didn't include any of this, right? Didn't include any density transfers from one section to the other. It didn't reserve that right for the future. It was silent on the subject. And then a partitioning occurred and subdivision happened, and now you have non-contiguous lots. And I don't think you just gotta hold over forever the idea that, well, if we had done something different, then therefore we could have done something different, but you didn't. You did what you did, so you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I'd be very supportive, and we would even see it if they were to come and want to modify the building space on Lot 7 and make that a multi-purpose building, put some housing on top of that existing building, or in the front of it. I don't care.
Yeah, so I agree with the Planning Commission on all three issues.
Yeah, same. It makes no sense that we get to have one lot and jump to another lot and use that lot area to determine the number of units that can have on the one lot. I'm still not even clear how that would work because let's say we said we would allow that. Lot 7 is already built out, so how do you get to use that lot area twice? And I think somebody tried to explain that under
it wasn't
mixed use
used because it hasn't been fully used.
Yeah, because they haven't used the housing.
In theory, you could build housing above the commercial on. This wouldn't happen, but in theory, you could, right? So that's the theory behind why there's still available units from that lot.
Borrowing density.
Well, no, the theory of why that unit itself could have lots on it is clear.
Yeah.
Why that would be able to be transferred to a non-contiguous lot is
what's
question.
unclear. Yeah. So I'm also supportive of Planning Commission's denial.
Sean? Oh, I think I've already given my answer. I'm in support of, and by the way, I'm with you as well. I hope they resubmit with something that meets the clear and objective standards, because I love supporting young families or me as I'm getting older. I love all of that and totally support it. So just know that this is not a slam on doing this kind of housing. It's more of, I agree with them that it was not, there was some fishiness in terms of trying to get to the area size. So I agree with the consensus there.
Sean, do you have any comment?
Not a whole lot additional. Yeah, the benefit of speaking last, as you guys have all kind of summarized. I think Doug meticulously went through those points pretty well, and as usual, I agree with Doug. I think the language was used when it was convenient, and it's not being used when it's not convenient. And I think I think yeah, the Planning Commission has done their work on this. I don't see any flaws with their judgment or their reasoning or the work that the staff has done. So I'm in favor of. I think it's option number one. I think that we have there is just to agree with the Planning Commission.
So, Eric and Carrie, would you want us to phrase the motion any differently than what is listed there?
No, but I would like the motion to include authorizing the mayor to sign a notice of decision in a few days after we have time to revise the findings, which will be the Planning Commission's decision with the gloss of the arguments we heard tonight.
I will make an attempt. I move that the city, nope, you took my language away.
Oh.
I move that the city council tentatively affirms the planning commission decision and denies the application based on the planning commission's findings report dated May 24, 2022, as well as this deliberation. Additionally, I move that the council authorizes the mayor to sign a notice of decision, including written findings consistent with the council's tentative decision on or before July 22nd, 2022.
Second.
Carrie, does that motion meet the letter of what you want to hear?
It is. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion on the motion, all in favor of the motion as stated by Doug, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, Eric and Carrie. And like we said, we hope that the applicant is still interested in presenting a project in the future.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
We don't have announcements or anything like that, but anything for the good of the order before we adjourn?
See you at Robin Hood.
Robin Hood Festival starting tomorrow night. Have a great weekend with that. It's going to be great weather. Carrie, great to see you and face to face, person to person. Eric, ditto. Good to see you live and in person after 2.5 years. And with that, we're adjourned.
Out of the PJs.
Thank you.
Hold on.